Okay, excellent. So welcome to our webinar. We are UC San Diego TREDS Research Center. You're here for a webinar on in-cab work zone alerts in California. We're going to talk about evidence, experience, and the path to safer trucking. If you're a multitasker, could one of our panelists or co-hosts throw that link to the TREDS programming into the chat where participants can see that? I know we had this in our waiting room, but we just always want to make a plug for all of our excellent grant-funded free driving education programs for a range of audiences. So we'll throw that in. Please check that out. Those are all free driving education programs. So we're thinking this webinar is going to run a generous maximum of 90 minutes, probably more like 75, but we like to have plenty of time for Q&A. We're going to have 30 minutes at the end. I know this is booked as a 2-hour slot. We know that we may have some fellow researchers in attendance, and sometimes those folks like to deep dive. So our panelists and co-hosts have generously agreed to stick around and stay here for us and be available for additional questions. This webinar, again, is being recorded. We're going to send out that recording to everyone who has registered, as well as our attendees afterwards. If you have any questions at all, substantive or technical ones, go ahead and use the Q&A function. You can comment anonymously, so please leverage that function if you need to. Any technical issues, please use that. And before we get started, we're going to launch a really quick poll here. So Leslie, when you are able, would you be so kind as to go ahead and launch our poll? Okay. So we've got a few questions here. Please don't be shy in terms of what are your goals for today's webinar? Which of the following best describes your professional sector, and how did you find out about that event? Excellent. Oh, great. We've got some very interesting mix here. I'm going to give people a few minutes. We see we've got quite a few participants who just jumped in. So welcome. If you didn't get the initial welcoming, we're doing a quick poll just to get a sense of our audience here. If you would be so kind, we're going to give folks just another minute because we've still got folks weighing in here. Okay, excellent. I'm going to go ahead. Oh, we got people jumping in. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. All right. And we've got a great blend of goals for today's webinar. So overall, the most common thing is people want to learn about the latest CMV safety research, which is great. That is our primary goal as well. We're really excited to see so many people interested in fleet and driver perspectives. That's such a key goal of this webinar as well. And we've got some folks who are interested in exploring implementing in-cab alerts in their own fleet. So we hope to give you some evidence there to make that decision. We've got some commercial fleet folks, we've got government agencies, we've got some researchers, safety professionals. Okay, and our TREDS mailing list for the win. Okay, excellent. Great. And again, just want to emphasize, you do have that Q&A function. This is a webinar, so we can't turn on your video, but there's going to be portions of the event that are really interactive, so we really hope to hear from everybody. Let's move on. So this webinar is being offered by UC San Diego TREDS. TREDS stands for Transportation Research and Education for Driving Safety. We are a transportation research group at UC San Diego Health within the Herbert Wertheim School of Public Health. We deliver education and training to improve roadway safety to a wide range of stakeholders. You see some of them listed here on the slide. We also conduct research to inform public policy on a range of topics. And at the end of this talk, we'll share a bit more about some of our other projects, including some free resources we hope will be of interest to you. We are so grateful to have such an outstanding group of panelists today. We do want to go a shout out. We were hoping to have someone from Caltrans. They had a last minute conflict. We know they're super busy, so huge thank you to Caltrans for their support, even though they were ultimately not able to make the panel. We're really excited to bring in perspectives from research, government, industry, technology, and the professional driving community. My name is Julia McMillan. I'm a research program manager here at UC San Diego TREDS. I had the pleasure of being the research manager for this specific study. I'm going to be the main one walking us through this webinar today. But we're going to be hearing from and building on the work of a lot of experts in the field. We are led by the amazing Dr. Linda Hill, the director of TREDS Research Center. Dr. Hill is a distinguished professor and founding faculty of the Herbert Wertheim School of Public Health, where she's also an associate dean. She is an iconic researcher in the field of transportation safety. Dr. Hill, would you care to grab the mic and take us through the rest of the intros?
Thanks so much, Julia, and welcome to everybody. We also have here on our panelists, Dr. Ryan Moran, TREDS co-director and associate professor in the Department of Medicine and Herbert Wertheim School of Public Health at UCSD. Dr. Moran has been a leader in transportation-related education and research for more than a decade. We have two panelists from the world of professional driving, Nick Chappie and Andrew King. Nick currently serves as the Director of Government and Regulatory Affairs at the California Trucking Association, CTA, where he's responsible for leading advocacy efforts, managing policy issues, and coordinating grassroots campaigns. He plays an integral role in advancing CTA's goals by engaging with policymakers and regulatory bodies, and he's deeply involved in the association's safety and environmental initiatives. Andrew is the Director of Operations for the Owner-Operator Independent Driver Association Foundation. He conducts industry research and analysis, including freight market research. He also develops, deploys, and administers educational programs such as OOIDA's Truck to Success. We are also joined by Mark Savage, the Director of Connected Truck Solutions for Drivewise by Fleetworthy. Mark retired from the Colorado State Patrol as deputy chief in 2020 after serving 26 years. Mark worked in the state patrol's field operation and executive security unit, but focused most of his career on improving commercial vehicle safety. We gratefully acknowledge Drivewise, thank you, as our technology partner, and it's been such a pleasure to work with them over the past 2 years. We want to emphasize, though, that though Drivewise provided the technical platform and integration to deliver alerts for this project, this study did not set out to evaluate and endorse any particular commercial project. I know I speak for everyone in this room when I say that our goal here is not to promote a specific product, but to answer the broader question of whether in-cab alerts delivered via any platform improve safety. Over the course of this 90-minute webinar, we're going to first set the scene for why work zone safety continues to be an increasingly important transportation safety issue. We're then going to explain our specific study on in-cab CMV alerting for active work zones in California. We're then going to discuss what goes into creating real-time work zone alerts for commercial motor vehicles. After that, we'll share our key findings and takeaways, and then we're going to have some live conversation, as Julia explained, with our trucking industry experts, Nick and Andrew, to hear about their reaction to these findings. We're going to have some audience polling during this time, and we're really looking forward to hearing from you, our safety experts, other folks in tab technology, and of course, our commercial drivers, to hear what you think of these findings, as well as your thoughts on technology and cab in general. We're then going to take a step back and talk about how policymakers, fleets, and independent drivers can encourage and promote the highest impact safety technologies to keep all road users safe. Finally, we have lots of time at the end set aside for Q&A, during which we'd love to hear any ideas you have for high impact safety research, as well as addressing any nitty-gritty clarifications or sharing any feedback that you didn't get a chance to share during the content presentation. As always, for any questions or concerns, feel free to utilize the Q&A chat in the Zoom, and one of our amazing team members will address your question. When we look at long-term TREDS and CMV-involved crashes in the United States, they have increased dramatically within the past decade, from 3,512 in 2010 to 5,472 in 2023. And with With that loss of life affects all road users. As CMVs are so large and heavy, when a crash involving passenger vehicles or other vulnerable road users, it's overwhelming the other road user who loses their lives. In 2023, for example, of the 5,472 fatalities and crashes involving large trucks, only 18% of those fatalities were amongst truck drivers and occupants. The remaining 82% were other road users, such as other vehicle occupants, 70%, and vulnerable road users like motorcyclists, bicycles, and pedestrians, which were 12%. As always, we want to emphasize that CMV drivers are overall excellent drivers, professional and extremely safe drivers. However, due to the sheer size, weight, and complexity of their vehicles, just like crashes involving commercial aircraft or cargo ships, any crashes they are involved in have the potential for a lot more damage and loss of life. This outsized impact is especially marked in work zones. Although only about 5% of registered vehicles in the US are CMVs in 2022, 30% of fatal crashes in work zones involved a large truck. We can see that both the proportion and the absolute number of fatal work zone crashes that involve a CMV have risen over the past decade. While the overall percent of CMV involvement in fatal work zone crashes now stands at just over 30%, the orange dotted line in the figure at the left, their proportional involvement has about 14% to almost 25%, the black solid line in figure at the left. When we look at the figure at the right, which breaks down specific types of work zones and CMV involvement in fatal crashes, we can see that in specific contexts like rural intersections, over 57% of fatal work zone crashes involve a CMV. This is true not only at the national level, but on the state level as well. In California, between 2013 and 2022, the number of annual work zone fatalities increased 117%, from 54 to 117, and the number of annual work zone truck-involved fatalities increased 155%, from 9 to 23. We should note Senate Bill 1, the Road Repair and Accountability Act of 2017. This legislative package invested $5.4 billion annually to fix roads, freeways, and bridges in communities across California. So we would definitely expect to see an increase in the number and frequency of work zones in California. So these numbers don't necessarily mean that driving behavior is poor or that work zones are becoming riskier and may be reflecting an increase in the total number of work zones. But either way, this means we need to be focusing on improving work zone safety. Next, Dr. Moran is going to discuss the rationale for our methodology. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. Thank you, Julia. Of course, there are many factors that contribute to CMV-involved work zone crashes. These factors are listed here on this slide, which include speeding, impairment, including that from substances, as well as from fatigue and long hours, distraction, and inattention. As Dr. Hill mentioned, the sheer size and characteristics of CMVs, which include their weight and the visibility for the drivers to be able to see other vehicles surrounding them. Cargo issues, inadequate training as an inexperienced or new drivers, inadequate work zone management, dangerous roadway conditions, such might be, as Dr. Hill mentioned, the road itself, or inclement weather, or lighting, passenger driving behaviors. Again, we will note that most of these factors are outside of the control of drivers themselves. However, electronic logging devices, or ELDs, might help to address some of these factors. Electronic logging devices are in-cab devices that, by law, must track hours of service for commercial drivers. They were mandated for all interstate commercial driving in 2017, with Wisconsin becoming the last U.S. state to require ELDs for interstate driving in 2025. While ELDs must be used to support compliance with hours of service regulations, drivers and fleets are experimenting with a range of functions, including monitoring, analyzing, and responding to driving behaviors, and sending out custom alerts to provide high-value information to drivers. Like other mobile devices, applications can be downloaded onto the ELD, such as those aimed to improve the performance and safety of drivers. including apps that offer pop-up alerts when hazards are approaching. These safety alerts could potentially mitigate many of these CMV work zone crashes that drivers are encountering, encouraging drivers to begin braking earlier and more gradually, and heightening awareness in higher risk areas. However, evidence to support their widespread use is still needed to understand the impact, and very recently, studies have begun to evaluate this very question. Next slide, please. A study out of Purdue University shown on the left associated in-cab congestion alerts with significant reductions in speed as slowdowns approach. Meanwhile, a different study, not shown here, out of Cleveland State University, calculated the financial benefit of over $14 million through direct and indirect crash reduction, with a favorable modeled benefit-cost ratio across a 2-year pilot study that was done in Ohio for in-cab safety alerts. Importantly, in-cab alerts in general appear to have a very low overall potential for distraction and have been highly rated by most drivers. A driver survey conducted by Kentucky Transportation Center, shown on the right, found that drivers overwhelmingly use these alerts to find them helpful. Work zone alerts, in particular, was one of the most highly valued alerts among drivers, as shown by the red arrow, indicating that most drivers are very interested in receiving work zone alerts. These limited studies in background provide a solid foundation. However, to date, there still remains sparse data on the impact of work zone alerts specifically, but rather focus on congestion and sudden slowdowns. Further, no studies to date have employed a true control group. Without a control group, it's hard to determine why a driver may have slowed. For example, if it was from the alert or some other factor that was responsible for the vehicle slowing, as well as to understand the relative nature of the slowing to the surrounding traffic. I'm now going to hand it back to Julia. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moran. All right. So in our current study, which will conclude September 30th of 2025, so just really a few weeks from now, our goal is to reduce CMV-involved work zone crashes by providing real-time alerts that notify CMV drivers in California of upcoming active work zone. Work zone data are provided by Caltrans' commercial wholesale web portal. Oh, apologies there. A publicly available data set, and we have consulted with Caltrans to ensure that we're interpreting and using these data correctly. Alerts display on in-cab electronic logging devices, and drivers receiving these alerts have enabled DriveWise Free, the safety alert service on the DriveWise platform. One moment, just have to cough. Alerts are MUTCD compliant and hands-free. The drivers receiving these alerts belong to fleets that have opted into these free safety alerts. So no new participants were recruited for the study. These vehicles provide back anonymous location data to DriveWise, which we then analyze to determine the impact of alerts. These alerts have been deployed for all active work zones in 2 Caltrans districts for over 16 months. Alerts were first deployed in Caltrans District 11 on April 1st of 2024, and then they were expanded into Caltrans District 2 on September 7th of 2024. Data collection for these districts, for the purposes of the findings we're presenting on today, concluded June 8th of 2025, but we are continuing to provide alerts through September 30th, and data are still being recorded. These 2 districts are, of course, very different. District 2 up in the northeast, very rural and mountainous roads. District 11 on the southern border includes San Diego, the metro region, and of course our border with Mexico. Together, these 2 districts comprise 36,000 square miles spanning 9 counties, testing alert deployment and data collection for rural, urban, suburban, and mountainous highways across the state. Alerts will also deploy in limited areas of District 7, just portions of the Interstate 5 for 4 weeks in August, September 2025. I think those actually just went live 2 days ago, I believe, so they just started. This will provide alert impact data for LA's famously ultra-heavy traffic, but we're not going to be examining that region today. We just started data collection, but those results will be forthcoming. So here is a breakdown of our data collection process. So all drivers who are part of this study drive for fleets that have already opted into the use of these DriveWise safety alerts. They're already accustomed to receiving these safety alerts. a randomly selected striated 25% control sample don't receive pop-up alerts for California work zones, but they receive all other safety alerts. No other alerts are suppressed or modified in any way. Vehicle location data collection starts 30 seconds before the alert goes out, with one data point collected per second until the close of the data collection period, which is 5 minutes after the alert point. From April 2024 to April 2025, drivers received a pop-up work zone alert and an accompanying chime 500 meters before the beginning of the work zone. Then, in response to survey feedback from drivers that we received in November through December of 2024, for a 2-month period, April through June of 2025, the alerts were instead sent out 2 miles before the work zone. These periods of time represent what we're going to refer to as phase 1 and phase 2 of our study. So that 500-meter alerting distance, that's phase 1. That 2-mile alerting distance, that's phase 2, respectively. Control group vehicles go through exactly the same process, but the visual pop-up and the chime are suppressed. From these data, and all vehicle ELDs, experimental and controlled, send back time-stamped data to DriveWise on their latitude and longitude from 30 seconds before the alert through 5 minutes after. From these data, we can determine bearing, speed, acceleration, and deceleration. The data we receive back are completely 100% anonymous to us. We have no ability to associate specific driving behavior with a specific driver, a specific fleet, or a specific vehicle. So there's no negative outcomes for participating, even if we were to observe some risky driving behaviors. These alerts can be disaggregated and visualized in a number of different ways. This includes day of the week or time of day, which can just be really nice for giving us a sense of when CMV traffic peaks in our areas and give us a sense of where we may wish to focus certain types of analyses. The graphs depicted here show data from April 1st to July 7th of 2024 only. This is just an illustrative sample, but we will be expanding these analyses to include the full data set. The top graph, that's days of the week. We didn't label days of the week because the lines are so close together, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, that would be really, really tiny. But the peaks are the middle of the week and the dips are the weekends. And the bottom graph has alerts by hour of day for a 24-hour period. So again, just great for giving us a sense of when traffic is generally highest and lowest to help guide our analyses. When we began this study, we hoped that these in-cab alerts would have both direct and indirect positive effects on safety in California. Some of our study objectives centered on effects that we could directly measure in response to work zone safety alerts. For example, do we find persuasive evidence that drivers who received these alerts slowed down more before and while passing through work zones than drivers who didn't receive these alerts? And that they engaged in less hard braking, which is a great proxy indicator of safer, more aware driving. Other objectives involved trying to develop some plausible hypotheses about the overall improvements to road safety that we might see if these alerts were expanded and scaled. So based on this pilot, a short period of time, a very limited deployment just through one app through select areas of the states, based on what we find here, in what ways could we move the needle on crash and fatality reduction across the state if we were to spread these alerts more widely? And finally, as we kind of spoke to at the top of the talk, we really wanted to evaluate and articulate the comprehensive benefits or drawbacks that this technology may hold for stakeholders like independent drivers, fleets, and government at various levels. We really see a strong role in supporting states, fleets, and independent drivers in making cost-effective and data-driven decisions regarding their investments in real-time alerting services. Many states are paying for the cost of these alerts, totaling millions of dollars in spend every year. States make this investment, often supported by federal funds, so that these alerts will be free to drivers and fleets to encourage their use. As with any safety technology initiative, we want to really make sure that this is an effective data-backed way to spend safety funding. So before we get into the data that we collected and what we found when we analyzed those data, we'd like to dig into the alerts themselves. So we'd like to share a little bit more about what it takes to produce an accurate real-time work zone alert and how government and private entities work together to make this technology happen. Our data were downloaded from, and we've got a link here. If Sarah or JJ, thank you so much for throwing that in the chat. That is our Caltrans source for the lane closure system data. This data set is updated every 5 minutes, and it reports on all approved closures planned for the upcoming 7 days, plus any current closures, because of course there may be emergency or unplanned closures. Caltrans staff from District 11 and 2 were so incredibly valuable for us in correctly interpreting these data, capitalizing on opportunities, and avoiding potential pitfalls. We learned a lot about how different districts may manage and label their data closures, the conditions under which these data might not actually be updated fully every 5 minutes, even if the data set is displaying as if it's completely up to date, and what data fields of the many options available may offer the most insight into the nature and risk level of specific work zones. I know those of us working with extremely large data sets, we start getting into the question of what fields do we preserve? What fields do we actually use? We just cannot use all of the fields or the data set would get too cumbersome. So not just having these data, but knowing what to look for, knowing what to keep, knowing what we can discard. They were incredibly helpful for that. We want to give a huge kudos to Caltrans, and they shared some insight into their ongoing work to improve data quality and reliability, including processes to check the accuracy of the start and end times. So we know this is always an improving process. They're really passionate about the quality of this data. And this was a great lesson for us, as I'm sure any other researchers in the field know when they're pulling in a variety of data sets. It's so wonderful for everybody in the safety community to share their safety data, make it publicly available. But just because you can access it by yourself without necessarily interacting with folks who made that data, always so much better to partner with them, learn from the folks creating and sharing the data, and that just helps us to use these data as meaningfully and effectively as possible. And now we have the pleasure of hearing from our DriveWise partners. I know Mr. Mark Savage is going to speak, and I do wish Brenda could have joined us today. She's been our primary project manager and has been just an absolute pleasure to work with. So Mark, I've turned on your video if you would care to go on video, and we would love to hear from you and get your insight on these alerts.
Well, thank you, Julie. I appreciate it. And good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to briefly tell you a little bit about the DriveWise connected truck platform and how that platform has been leveraged to provide this service in Southern California and Northern California. So the DriveWise platform is North America's largest connected truck platform. And we are connected into literally thousands, tens and hundreds of thousands of trucks across the country through the driver's electronic logging device. And our electronic logging device partners, which count over 100, pre-install our software or embed it onto their hardware. So there's no additional hardware required in the truck, and it is always on. So this platform delivers messages to our DriveWise bypass service customers, as well as other drivers, and it's free through our DriveWise Free, which is already DriveWise Free program, which has already been mentioned. The software is able to be downloaded on an Android or Apple device, should the driver not be required, as some are exempt from the electronic logging device requirement. And those drivers will still be able to get these alerts for free should they download the app on their mobile device. As we already stated, though, these alerts are sponsored by the agency, and as a result, are free to all drivers. So how do these how do these alerts work? So because the software is already embedded onto the electronic logging device within the truck, we use that electronic logging device to communicate back and forth with the DriveWise platform. So we can transmit data to the driver, such as these alerts, and also receive information back, as we've talked about that as well today. So it runs silently in the background, and when a driver approaches an area before a work zone, we have established geofences in advance of those hazards, whether they be the work zone or a traffic congestion. And when the truck hits that geofence, it wakes up the device and provides the alert. And the alert appears on the screen automatically and comes with an auditory chime. So the driver can can receive that message. The messages use simple iconography and minimal text. So with a quick glance, the driver can digest the alert, and after 10 seconds, the alert will disappear. It's completely hands-free and no action is required by the driver. So in the background, as the alerts, as we collect data for the alerts, we can digest that data from a variety of sources. In this specific case, the work zone alerts in California, we're actually using APIs to pull the lane closure data feed for each participating district. We then review each feed to understand the nuances of how each district populates their feed and filter out any records that don't directly relate to a work zone or work zones that are not active. We also try to understand the impact on lane availability for each work zone, and where possible, we'll include lane closure details in the alert message. So based on the information we get from the lane closure feeds, we place geofences upstream of the work zone to give trucks some extra time to prepare. Once we deliver the alert, we also collect anonymized speed and geolocation of the truck for 5 minutes after the alert. It's this data that the UCSD team has been working to try to understand how drivers behave after they get the alert. So this is the first study specific to work zones that anyone has done leveraging the driver behavior that we collect. And one of the unique requirements of the study was the desire to compare the behavior of drivers who receive the alerts versus or in comparison to drivers who do not. Thank you, Julie, and I appreciate UCSD and Caltrans and our other partners in this project.
Thank you so much, Mark. Okay. So now that we have some grounding in how these alerts are generated, let's get into sending them out and seeing their effect on road safety. We began sending out alerts April 1st, 2024 in Caltrans District 11. We are based in San Diego, so this is right where we live. And then we added Caltrans District 2 in September of 2024. Again, for the purposes of this talk, we completed our data collection on June 8th of 2025, but we are still sending out alerts to drivers through the end of September 2025, and we'll of course be conducting a final analysis on that full data set. We have been alerting on all types of Caltrans lane closures. To date, this has included 72 distinct reasons for conducting lane closures, everything from emergency repairs to massive long-term projects to vegetation removal. This may include anything from 0 lanes, so just on the shoulder, to complete closure of the entire highway. While not all these lane closures are strictly work zones, for example, it could be law enforcement activity or filming on the shoulder, this safety impact for drivers and other road users was similar enough to include all these reasons for closing lanes or for activity on the shoulder. The only category we filtered out was anything marked as just involving a parking lot. Since this study was the first to include a control group for in-cab alerts, we made multiple methodological improvements in our first 9 months of alerting. That was a real learning period of time for us. Absolutely, we always ensured that drivers had a seamless and accurate alerting experience, so no concerns that were driver-facing, but we worked a lot to improve the quality of the data we were pulling in to assess the impact of these data, of these alerts. For this reason, for the first 9 months of alerting, we only looked at driver behavioral changes from 10 seconds before through 10 seconds after the alert, even though we were collecting data on 30 seconds through 5 minutes. We explored many different ways to analyze these data: means, medians, modes, grouping into speeds, deciles, separating by Caltrans district, sorting by incoming speed. We also grouped data according to specific subtype of alerts drivers received. As we'll get into a little later, we were able to give lane-specific alerts for left, right, or general closure. So other researchers who may be really interested in the methodology, the methodological improvements, very happy to deep dive with you during the extended Q&A. But here are our top findings. The first key finding, again, this is for phase 1, that we found when we compared drivers traveling above 55 miles per hour, which is the California CMV speed limit, and that's at left, with the drivers who were traveling at or below the California CMV speed limit, and that's the drivers at right. In these graphs, miles per hour of traveling speed is that vertical axis, and seconds after alerting is the x-axis, the horizontal one. And the key thing here is you can see there's a difference between these graphs. The one where folks are driving at or below the speed limit, relatively flat. over the speed limit, we've got that decrease in speed. And we did not see any effect of the alerts for the drivers who were already going the speed limit. So if somebody was already going the speed limit, we didn't really see a difference between getting the alert and not getting the alert. However, drivers who were going above the speed limit definitely decreased their speed limit more if they got an alert than if they were a control driver. So alerted drivers traveling above 55 reduced their speed within this 10-second period by about 1.5 miles per hour. So 1.5 miles per hour more than the control group. So obviously this is a really tiny reduction in speed, 1.5 miles per hour. But first off, this is on average, many, many thousands of vehicles. This is only within a 10-second period of time. And we interpret this as a valid behavioral clue that these alerted drivers are more aware of their surroundings and they're more able to respond effectively to the heightened risk surrounding an active work zone. This was really bolstered as a finding when we looked at our survey data, which we'll get into in a few slides. Prior to June 23rd of 2024, all of our alerts were work zone ahead, slow down. They were general. There was no difference in the alerts drivers received. And we used this general alert, again, as we focused on fine-tuning, making sure the experience was consistently excellent for those drivers, and improving our data collection process. However, once we got those fundamentals in place during the first couple of months, we expanded our alerts. So this included custom alerts that would say left lane closed or right lane closed if a single left or right lane was closed in the incoming data we were receiving from Caltrans. So by December 23rd of 2024, we had about 15,000 of those left lane closed, about 31,000 of those right lane closed, and almost 122,000 of those general work zone ahead slow down alerts. And what we wanted to know was, would drivers respond more strongly to an alert that was more tailored? And we found that this was indeed the case. So for drivers who were going over 55 miles per hour, so again, drivers who were going the speed limit, less of an impact. But for drivers who were exceeding that CMV speed limit, the lane-specific alerts were up to 1.5 times more effective in getting those drivers to slow down in those first 10 seconds after alerting. Again, these reductions in speed are very subtle. You'll see the miles per hour on the left-hand side. This is all happening within a 2.5 mile per hour band. But again, this is averaged over many, many thousands of vehicles, many, many thousands of work zones. And we see this again as a great behavioral cue and clue that these drivers are responding. They're more aware of their surroundings and they're more able to slow down as needed. And this further supported our hypothesis that drivers would respond more to alerts that gave them actionable insights. So if a driver knows you need to get left, there's a specific area of the roadway where you may expect a hazard, we found that these alerts did seem to be a little more effective for drivers. We were so glad to be able to survey the drivers receiving these alerts because their perspective really helped us to validate what we felt we were seeing. So we had a total of 715 drivers who responded to our survey, which is really excellent numbers. Of those, 422 said, yes, I have definitely seen these California work zone specific alerts within the past 3 weeks. So we focused on those folks because we felt that their recollection would probably be the best. We did not explicitly ask drivers, about whether they found those alerts distracting or whether they liked them. We really wanted to focus on their behavioral response. And we were really excited to see that 83% reported that they paid increased attention to their surroundings, and 82% reported reducing their speed. Drivers also had an opportunity to provide open feedback, and more than 60 drivers took the time to provide additional open-ended feedback. So again, we're so appreciative of these folks in the professional driving community taking the time to give us direction and ideas on how we can improve these alerts. The feedback was overwhelmingly quite positive, or included constructive criticism, ideas for improvement. And a pretty consistent theme was that a lot of drivers said 500 meters is not far enough ahead. We're moving quickly, there's a lot of traffic, we need time to respond. They asked for the alerts earlier. And since Drivewise currently sends out their congestion and sends slowdown alerts 2 miles ahead of those areas, we said, let's try this. Let's try putting out these alerts 2 miles ahead instead of 500 meters. And that took us to phase 2, where we changed the alerting distance. And I'm not able to monitor chat. I do see that chat is happening, so I would just encourage folks on the Q&A or webinar support staff, if something is a pertinent question and you want to just chime in, please feel free to go ahead and interrupt, and I'm happy to answer that live if you feel like it's a good fit. So thank you for our tech support folks. So in phase 2, which comprised data collection from April 3rd to June 8th of 2025, so just a couple of months, we still collected close to 89,000 vehicle visits for 1,760 active work zones across Caltrans districts 2 and 11. So just emphasizing this was an extremely high volume of data that we were working with. The only methodological change was that the alerting distance was changed from 500 meters to 2 miles before the active work zone. Everything else about the alerting experience, the data collection experience, remained identical. Thanks to all the improvements we made during that phase 1, we were now able to look at 30 seconds before through 5 minutes after alerting. So our full data set, because we felt really confident that we had excellent quality control data here. We also completed a smaller scale driver-facing survey that ran July through August. So we just got those findings back about a week ago. We'll be presenting on those today. And the focus here was less on the general feedback, since we'd gotten such a strong answer the first time around, and more on getting some feedback on that change in alerting distance. That was really our primary goal. So when we looked to replicate our findings, we looked to say, okay, are we seeing the same thing now that we've changed the alerting distance? Here's what we found. Key takeaway: alerted vehicles did continue to slow down more than control vehicles at higher speeds. So just as with the first study, we found that for folks who were already at or below the speed limit, the alerts didn't seem to have much of an impact. In this second round of analysis, with the alerts going out, again, 2 miles before as opposed to 500 meters, we didn't see that behavioral change happening at 55 miles per hour. We only saw it when we looked at those vehicles that were really excessively speeding. So vehicles going at least 70 miles per hour pre-alert. However, the effect here was not subtle. It was very, very strong. So for those extreme speeders in District 11, so the San Diego southern border, if you were an alerted driver and you were traveling over 70 miles per hour before your alert, if you got an alert, you reduced your speed by an average of 5.6 miles per hour more than control vehicles. This was even more marked in District 2. So again, that northern, mountainous, rural area. In District 2, if you were a driver, commercial driver, traveling over 70 miles per hour, and you got this alert, you reduced your speed by an average of almost 10 miles per hour more than the control vehicles over this period of time. So a really huge reduction in speed difference for those extreme speeders who got the alert versus did not. And this was a really fascinating finding for us, and we look forward to talking about this a little bit with Nick and Andrew during our conversation piece with our driving associations. This was really interesting for us because we certainly got feedback from drivers talking about, depending on the road conditions, the passenger driving behaviors, they may not feel safe at all going 55. There may be too many folks going too quickly. So 55 may not be the most useful speed cutoff. Having a much higher cutoff may be a more useful one here. And also, noting if you look at these sample sizes in that chart at right with the District 2 and District 11, these are tiny numbers of drivers. So out of, again, we had something like 89,000 vehicle visits during this period of time. Only a total of 179 vehicles from all of those data points were speeding this excessively. So it really underlies that most of the drivers are really excellent. However, this tiny percentage, so a fraction of a single percent who were excessively speeding, these alerts really had a really marked, really striking impact on the speed. When it came to looking at the impact of lane-specific alerting, so left or right lane closed specifically, we did not see an impact here in this second phase of study, but we're going to dig into why that might be the case a little bit later on. So how do we make sense of these differences, and what do we feel confident reporting on as this study draws to a close? So with all the changes made between phase 1 and phase 2 of data collection, these data really are apples and oranges. We know especially that changing the alerting distance from 500 meters to 2 miles, a more than 6-fold increase in alerting distance, greatly changed the period of time over which drivers reacted to the alerts, and therefore potentially the intensity of the effect. This change in alerting distance may, of course, change the other cues drivers experience, the slowing of surrounding traffic, signage, or cones placed by work zone crews. We are glad to continue to see that these alerts have a significant effect on reducing driver speed for those drivers who are exceeding the CMV speed limit. Although the cutoff speed at which we see this effect is different between the two data samples, this effect is much more marked in the second sample, indicating that there really is something here. And then again, while we were disappointed to see that the effect of lane-specific alerting disappeared in the second sample, this was a very, very subtle effect in the first sample. And given again that we had increased alerting distance by more than 6 times, it may simply be that the reductions in speed washed out in the other data set. So we were very curious, how is this supported or not supported by the round 2 survey findings? So survey number 1 back in November and December of 2024, drivers told us they wanted, on the balance, to get the alerts earlier. So we made that change. We moved from 500 meters to 2 miles. And we wanted to know not just what impact on behavior this would have, but how drivers would perceive this time. And we know that the way that we perceive things doesn't always match up with our behavioral change. So this second round of surveying ran from July 7th to August 12th of this year. Again, just closed 10 days ago. This was a much smaller launch with a focus on getting driver feedback on the impact of changing alerting distance from 500 meters to 2 miles. For this, we had a total of 79 valid driver responses, and we focused on those 42 drivers who said, yes, I've gotten California work zone alerts within the past 3 weeks. So in this graph we have here, we compare driver responses from survey 1, which again took place in 2024. We had 422 responses where these drivers said, yes, I have gotten these specific alerts within the past 3 weeks. And then we've got survey number 2, which was in 2025. And here we had only 42 responses from drivers who said, yes, I've definitely got these specific alerts within the past 3 weeks. So we've got that blue line is 2024, the larger sample earlier. Orange line, 2024, smaller sample, 2025, smaller sample, more recent. And in the 2025 data, what really popped for us is though almost 50% still said that they slowed down anticipating traffic ahead. Obviously, this was a big drop relative to that 82% we saw earlier. Furthermore, almost 60% still reported that they paid increased attention to their surroundings. So that's still a really robust bit of feedback, but that's lower than the 83% we saw before. At the same time, remember these alerts are now going out more than 6 times earlier. So that 2 miles versus 500 meters. So a behavioral response of increased vigilance, maybe less need to slow down immediately, maybe a perfectly reasonable and logical response to these alerts. Slowing down isn't always what we're looking for, especially if a driver is already at a safe speed. And we were really encouraged to see that it seems like 2 miles really was the Goldilocks alerting distance. So exactly half of our respondents said that the alerts were generally well timed. And the proportion who said they wanted them earlier and the proportion who said they wanted them later were exactly the same. So perfect bell curve. There was no change in alerting distance we could have made per these survey responses that would have improved satisfaction. And since at this time, we can't personally customize the alerting distance, we know everyone has a preferred driving style, we feel great about the choice to send out alerts at 2 miles. We were also glad to see that 75% of lane-specific alerts were reported as accurate, especially as we know from all of our collaboration with Caltrans, how many steps are involved in Caltrans populating and sharing that lane closure system data. So kudos to Caltrans and your partners for keeping that excellent data quality despite a lot of factors going into that. And finally, we were really struck by the range of driver feedback in the free response section. So some people passionately wanted alerts earlier, some later. Some wanted way more, some wanted way fewer. Some like the chime, some turn off the chime, some wish they could turn off the chime. Some find them distracting. Others say these are really helpful in keeping me focused on the road. Some wanted lots of details about the upcoming work zones. What's the speed limit? What lanes are closed? What's the nature of the work? What's the congestion level? Others do not win any of this. So I think as with any driver, any human, this really speaks to how diverse the population of commercial drivers is. How many years they've been driving, their skill, their style, their familiarity with these roadways. Are they from out of state? Do they drive these roads every day? The type of CMV they're driving, road conditions. There really is no one-size-fits-all approach to road safety. We also wish we could have had more insight into what is in all of these specific cabs. Do they have other apps or safety tools running that are providing additional information that may lead to alerting overload if they've got 3 different alerting services, perhaps? Maybe they have speed governors, automatic braking. The technology in the cabs really varies so widely, and that could be making these alerts redundant or providing conflicting information. So much diversity in where these alerts are coming in and how they're being used. So what are we looking forward to in the remaining just over a month of the study and beyond? So the analyses you saw here were the tip of the iceberg. We really wanted to present on what was most striking, most actionable, most useful for folks saying, are these alerts for me? Should my state invest in these alerts? Should my fleet do this as an independent driver? Should I download this app or an app like it? But we are continuing to expand on and refine all of the analyses presented on in this webinar. We're absolutely going to do more to look at day of the week, time of day, and type of work zone to understand the comprehensive effect of these alerts. We have also been collecting data on and will be engaging in some analyses of hard braking behavior, i.e. drivers who are exceeding safe limits of deceleration, to see what impact alerts may have on reducing rates of rapid deceleration. Since we don't have the mass of these vehicles, our ability to conduct these analyses is a little lower, but 7 miles per hour per second of reduction seems to be a good, generally agreed upon benchmark. So we're just using speed as opposed to total force of deceleration. Something we're really excited about, and that we'll be starting on soon, is taking a closer look at a subset of high impact work zones in the Caltrans lane closure system data. So we're very curious about whether focusing on the highest impact lane closures may show us a stronger effect. We will soon have some data from the Los Angeles region of District 7. As I mentioned earlier, we just started sending out alerts there 2 days ago. We're only going to get a month of data here, but as we saw from a presentation on phase 2, we had almost 90,000 vehicle visits in 2.5 months. So we're, especially given how much volume we get in LA, we should have plenty of data to really focus on what we're going to be seeing in that area. We have also been working with a professor in the Halegiolu Data Science Institute at UCSD to map and cluster some individual vehicle speed patterns to get more specific driver behavioral profiles, while of course maintaining the full anonymity of our data set. We do not know anything about these drivers, so even if we map an individual vehicle, we don't know anything about who that is, what fleet they drive for, etc. We have a small handful of example points visualized here. But I think especially after our phase 2 findings that there is a tiny number of drivers. Again, it was something like 179 out of 89,000 who were going 70 miles per hour or above. We may find that an in-depth analysis of a small handful of drivers will yield some interesting insights. And finally, we are working with our state level partners. So again, a special thank you to CHP and Caltrans here to obtain all the data we can on work zone intrusions, near crash or high risk events that involve CMVs. So of course, California Highway Patrol is giving us SWITTers. That's also publicly available, which is crashes. But Caltrans has also been really helpful in looking at incidents where a crash did not occur, but there was a high risk of crash. So again, what we're looking at is how can we filter, zoom in, really focus on specific points in such a massive data set to really glean the key findings. Okay, now on to, I know I'm not the only one for whom this is my favorite part of the talk, but we're going to be hearing from our CMV experts, from Mr. Nick Chiappi from the California Trucking Association, or Nick Chappie, my apologies. Nick Chappie from the California Trucking Association, and Mr. Andrew King from the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association Foundation. Well, both of these panelists are deeply familiar with the CMV industry and with commercial drivers. We're really glad to bring in perspectives that include large fleets, small fleets, and independent drivers. Nick and Andrew were generous enough to collaborate with TREDS throughout this study, and we always appreciated how they never held back on questions or concerns. So just thank you to them again for helping us strengthen our research process at every step of the way. So Nick and Andrew, if you're, oh, great, and you're on camera, excellent. So, we've presented a lot here. I know this is not your first time seeing this data, these findings. As you look at what we're looking at here, as professional drivers, as folks who represent drivers, diverse drivers, independent, small fleets, medium fleets, big fleets, what are you seeing here? What's really popping for you?
Hi, Julia. Nick here with CTA. Thank you again for including us. Greatly appreciate having fleets being a part of this conversation. And, in an aggregate, the findings are very insightful and reflective of the ongoing dialogue around in-cab safety technology. It's encouraging to see that the data is driving this conversation, especially when it highlights that importance of driver perception and usability with these in-cab technologies and alerts. And it reaffirms, what many in the industry have experienced firsthand, that technology is most effective when it's intuitive and when the driver feels like it supports rather than polices their work. In regard to, the specific results, I would say I'm not surprised about the outcome. Truck drivers are often concerned the most about the speed differential between light-duty passenger vehicles and commercial motor vehicles in California specifically. We've heard this concern from our members for many number of years, that there is a great risk as a truck driver to be involved in an accident or a collision where a passenger vehicle strikes the rear end of a CMV. So in California specifically, for those who live here and drive on the roads, sometimes it may feel like the speed limit is just merely a suggestion for some passenger vehicles. And this is backed by data. Rear end accidents, according to NHTSA, are typically one of the most common reoccurring accidents. NHTSA had shared in a recent study back in 2022 that a large truck was struck in the rear 21% of the time from another vehicle, whereas when they struck another vehicle from the rear, it only occurred about 6.9% of the time. So I think there is anxiety from these truck drivers when they're on the road that you may not necessarily see a huge reduction in speed when they're receiving these alerts. In that data, we saw that it was a 1.5 mph reduction in speed. And so even with the control group, those that were already going the speed limit, not necessarily saw a reduction in their total speed. And I've shared this with the TREDS team before, but I'm not sure if anybody here has rented a U-Haul truck and driven on the California highways. It can feel like race cars are going by you when you're driving 55 to 65 miles an hour. So I can only imagine, as a truck driver driving a very long truck, and with the speed at which some of these passenger vehicles operate, it may be more wise to stick to that speed limit and not go below it, because there could be an increase ultimately in the possibility of a rear end crash between a passenger vehicle and a truck. So those are my initial thoughts on this to begin with, and would love to hear what Andrew has to say as well.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. I appreciate it. And thank you, Julia, for having me. And just to emphasize also what Nick said, it's always good to have truck drivers involved, and having associations that deal with them, have them as members on a day-to-day basis. It's always something that we're appreciative of, because that hasn't traditionally been done, but it seems to be more and more common here of late. And so thank you very much for that. And And kind of my thoughts were very similar to Nick's. They make sense, the findings. Um, we've stated for a very long time that speed differentials are it's a safety issue. And so it doesn't surprise me that there are some vehicles that go over the speed limit. But it also makes sense too that it was a very small number of them that were excessively speeding. And I think that kind of bears record too to a statement that you kind of mentioned, but I just want to emphasize a little bit more that a lot of these crashes that do occur, most of them are not at the fault of the truck driver, right? Our truck drivers, especially our members, have been on the road. They've been in the industry for 20 plus years. They have very few accidents, if any at all. Uh, they're very skilled at what they're doing, and the roadway is their workplace. They do it day in and day out. And so it makes sense to me that there was a small number that did speed excessively, and that those who did get those alerts, and especially the alerted group, not necessarily the control group, but they did respond immediately. But it only takes a few, bad eggs to spoil the bunch, unfortunately. But overall, I think the findings made a lot of sense to us, to me, exactly what I would expect to find, that they were getting those alerts and that they're responding fairly quickly to them. Yeah, I'll leave it at that for now and kind of move on to some of the other questions that you had.
Excellent. No, love these answers. And, the next question we have here is we're really focusing on moving the needle in the real world. So we're researchers, we're seeing an impact, we're talking amongst ourselves, but we also know that unless drivers and fleets not only download these alerts and enable them, but also trust the information that they're getting. There are obviously so many technology products vying for the attention of drivers and fleets. They've got big promises. So what are your thoughts on how driver and, of course, fleet trust and buy-in affect adoption?
I guess I could take a turn at that one first and hand it over to Nick. But that's obviously a huge one. I mean, we represent different types of members. Our members are generally one truck operations, or they're leased on, or they're a company driver. So this is very big. And I think both sides maybe come at it from a little different view. But obviously, any safety technology, if a driver cannot trust it to work properly, and as was mentioned earlier, something that helps them drive, not polices them, not takes over necessarily. I mean, again, if you had been driving for 20 years and you've never had an accident, and then someone comes along and says, hey, you need to have all this equipment on here because it's going to make you safer, you'd probably pause and say, I think I know what I'm doing. But we also know everyone can, you can't always, you have to be on the lookout for the other vehicles around you as well. So you do need that assistance that helps. So making sure that these things work correctly. So like you mentioned, the 75% correct rating on just the lane changes or lane closures, and talking with our members in technology similar to this, that's a big thing for them. Not just having the alert that there is a work zone coming up, but also knowing what lanes to get into. Obviously, it takes a little bit more to maneuver. They can't go as fast as other vehicles. So having that kind of information actually is incredibly, incredibly helpful. And so making sure that that is the most accurate will encourage that buy-in for drivers to actually, turn that on and to want to invest in it themselves, especially for owner operators. So.
Yeah, I think to speak to the other side, since CTA, we mainly represent larger fleets that are going to have, quite a few employee drivers. Driver trust is going to be central to adoption, and Andrew talked about the policing component of it. Drivers don't want to feel like they're being policed when they're receiving these sorts of technology. So I think it's meaningful that having these alerts are used as co-pilots rather than monitors, instead of it being used as a way to police and be kind of spying, not necessarily spying, but being intrusive into a cab where a truck driver is. building that trust starts with the transparency, proper training, and giving drivers a voice on the implementation process of these sorts of devices. And since it is coming from an ELD, it may not necessarily seem as intrusive as other different types of safety technologies, which is why most likely you see drivers accurately responding to this as well, because it's not going to be ending up on their record or being dinged for it. They're going to be understanding that this is data driven, and that it's for safety reasons and not just to ensure that you are paying attention necessarily. So I think more than anything, it's being used as a crutch to provide safety and not to be an intrusive piece of technology.
I love that. And I love your analogy of the co-pilot. And, I'm really reflecting, you're talking about the road is their workplace. And, I'm thinking about obviously all of us, no matter our industry, we're seeing technologies come in and we have emotional reactions to those. We don't want to feel policed. We don't want to feel like our work is being taken. And I think we all share that perspective of how is this lightening the load, helping me to do my job well, but it's a tool I'm using as opposed to something that's coming in and affecting me negatively in some way. I really love that perspective.
And to add a little bit more to that,
Yeah.
drivers understand like the why behind technology. They're far more likely to support it and use it effectively.
Mhm.
I think that's essentially the crux of what's happening here.
Love that. Well, then with your perspective on the fleets and drivers, do you have any specific insights? We talked a little bit about the experience of using this particular alerting technology. Obviously, there's many different technologies on the market. What do you think fleets and drivers really want in an alert system or in, any in-cab technology?
I think Andrew touched on this in his last comment was, fleets and drivers want something that's reliable and accurate, but also non-distracting as well. Uh,
Mhm.
I think, from what we saw from some of the survey responses is, that 50% threshold of those that found it useful, but then you had, both sides of the spectrum where those thought it was not enough or those thought it was too much. So I think it really what it comes down to is those specific kind of drivers that do find it useful. And if there's a way in the future to customize it, you may be able to increase the amount of users because they can customize it to their preference of how they want these alerts, and you may actually see some increase in responses to, or at least in reduction of speed in these work zone areas because they've been able to tailor it to how they drive their truck versus a kind of canned, you're getting an alert without you being able to, customize that to how you feel you would react when receiving those.
Yeah, I'll just echo that real quick because it was the same thought that I was having with the customization. Because even by terrain, if you can already see the work zone ahead at 500 meters or even at 2 miles because it's flat, but in a mountainous terrain, having that alert a little bit sooner because you can't see ahead would be different. That's so being able to customize that just also by terrain, I think would be incredibly helpful. And kind of like what Nick mentioned, one thing that we'd be particularly afraid of is people just getting annoyed with it or getting so used to it that they stop really responding. And I wonder, and I don't know, you can answer this question or not, but from the difference between phase one and phase two, did those phase two drivers have they already been familiarized with the in-cab alerting? Is that the reason why it maybe didn't show up as much, except for only those who are excessively speeding?
Yeah, we had some. Oh, I'm sorry to cut
Oh
you.
no,
Please.
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, unfortunately, the plus and the minus of the complete anonymity of our data set means that we can't
Oh,
fully answer that.
yeah.
However, we can say it's we started with 382 fleets domiciled in California that had subscribed to this alerting service. So I think the question is, within a period of 1 year, how much turnover would we expect in the participating fleets? How much turnover might we expect in the participating drivers? So uh, I think your guess is probably better than mine. I think
Sure.
if we have an opportunity to do another phase of this study, just to give you a sneak peek, we are trying to look at ways to anonymize the data more for research purposes while collecting a little more information, perhaps on the back end to have to answer questions like these.
Yeah.
But yeah, unfortunately, that's an
Because
unknown.
I would
I
imagine
see
that
a
that
hand
would
up from
definitely
Sarah, so we will know.
influence,
Yeah. Mhm.
the
Oh,
results.
yeah. And Sarah, our lead analyst has her hand up, so I'd love to hear from Sarah.
Oh,
Yes.
I was listening to Nick and Andrew talk about the customization of such a system such that, you can dismiss alerts that are too distracting, or you can request more alerts if that's necessary. And as Andrew was saying, based on terrain and things like that. I also don't know a super ton about ELDs, but I know that there are a lot of other types of alerts being received on those ELDs, things about, way stations and you know, any other types of things. It might be helpful, as far as customization goes, to think about how drivers might want to prioritize the types of alerts that they're getting, which ones are more important to them, which ones impact the way that they move through their work. So that's just another thought that I had.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right, and then we have one more question for Nick and Andrew until we turn it over to some audience Q&A. We'll do a little poll first, then some audience Q&A. So this is a little bit bigger picture, and I think you've hit on a lot of these in response to this question and the preceding one. But as the safety technology landscape in the cab rapidly expands and shifts, obviously technology is changing for all of us in every sector, but in the commercial driving space, this is really happening quickly. What do you think best serves drivers, fleets, and all road users? Again, with goal of, everyone goes home safely at the end of the day. Where do you see any friction or any shared goals that we should keep in mind as we're trying to make these broad, very effective partnerships across government and research and driving and industry? Where's our opportunities and our pitfalls there?
We kind of touched on it a little bit already, but the biggest friction point is the fear that not just, I mean, this is in-cab alerting. This isn't, going super far into technology, but the fear, of course, is that autonomous vehicles are on the horizon many years down the road, and perhaps that eliminates the way that our members make a living. And so just to go to one extreme, so that's obviously a friction, and I think that's in people's minds in general. You touched on it, Julia, that people sometimes have an apprehension towards technology in general, and especially our members who have been on the road for a long time. That's something that particularly upsets them is it's technology, and more than anything, it's just the way that it's phrased, the way that it's pushed, I think is the big issue. I think most of them agree. I mean, they absolutely want to be safe. I mean, this is their livelihood. This is how they make a living and support their families. And of course, they don't want to hurt anyone else out on the road. And they've been doing this for a long time, but yet at the same time, I imagine many of them would accept some technologies as being truly helpful. So just how you the phrase the situation, I think makes a huge difference in how it actually impacts drivers and carriers on whether they're going to adopt something or not. If you come out of the gate saying there's 5,000 fatality crashes every year is caused by truck drivers, you basically said, hey, don't listen to me anymore. But if you say more of, there are a lot of accidents, you can't always predict what other drivers are going to do on the roadway. This might help you to keep yourself safe, to keep others safe. That's a wholly different message, and one that's a lot more acceptable.
Really appreciate that.
Yeah, and I'm gonna beat the same drum that I've been talking about, which is when it comes with fleets, you want to make sure that driver input is being heard. So friction can occur when the technology is being rolled out without sufficient driver input, or when it's perceived to be punitive as well. So I think at the end of the day, when we talk about shared goals, the shared goals are to prevent crashes and reducing incidents. as well creating a safer environment for all users on the road. So, for CTA specifically in our fleets, it's about safety, it's about compliance and reducing liability. So, for a lot of fleets, it's maintaining and walking that line of how can I ensure that my drivers are maintaining a safe environment while on the road, but as well as making sure that their input is heard, that these sorts of technology aren't going to be considered annoying or not helpful, that it's going to be adding to their driving experience and creating more safety benefit for them that fits them and their needs.
Lovely. Well, before we pivot to and I trust that my incredibly apt tech squad will jump in if we should do something different. I think we're going to pivot to our second and final poll of the day, get a little bit of perspectives on these alerts specifically. Great. And I know we really did our best to get as many fleets and drivers as we could here today, but we also appreciate those folks are busy. So please feel free to answer this poll. You don't have to be a fleet or a driver. It can be, have you used in-cab alerts before? It can be, your familiarity with them as a researcher, or your familiarity with them as a law enforcement officer, something like that. So we just want to get a sense of, your general familiarity with these technologies, your general opinion on them. So there's 3 questions in there. So be sure to answer all 3 before you go ahead and hit submit. We've got some activity here. Love all the answers. I'm going to give folks 1 more minute. Thanks for the participation. Some of us are multitasking and maybe having a lunch break too while we're listening in. So appreciate not everyone may be able to answer. All right, I think our responses are slowing down, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results. Okay, so we've got a real mix. Some folks using them regularly, some a limited extent, some never use them. So hopefully this will be helping you make a decision about whether maybe you want to use these in the future. Okay, and we're seeing generally a really positive read. So again, I'm appreciating we don't have a representative sample of the entire industry here, but overall we're seeing very valuable is the dominant response. And we see work zone highly rated, and also congestion, sudden slowdown, real-time incidents, and speed limit. So this really compares very closely to what we saw with drivers, although I think when we looked at driver perspectives, parking was way the heck up there in terms of importance. Great, thank you for sharing those perspectives. All right, and then Sarah and JJ are, again, excellent, and Leslie, excellent support here. Anything we want to share from the Q&A? Please feel free to just jump in.
Yes, I have one question from the Q&A. This question is for the researchers. They wanted to know, did you do any other types of analysis on specific work zone locations? For example, were in-cab alerts more effective in really busy single lane work zones compared to ones that just were cutting the grass on the side of the road?
Yeah, absolutely. I do not think as of this time, and again, I know we have some data analysis firepower here in the room, so please jump in if I'm incorrect here. I think we haven't gotten to that yet. I think that is one of our next steps. Again, one of the key factors, one of the key data fields we found in the Caltrans work zone lane closure system data is something called CHIN reportable. And this is sort of a blanket criterion for the highest impact work zones that they think folks should be most aware of, like law enforcement should be aware of. And that is specifically half or more of lanes are closed, as a few more criteria that will flag it. So that is going to be one of our areas we look at next. And I know we also have put on our long analysis docket to sort of look at, okay, by 0 lanes closed, 1 lanes closed, 2 lanes closed, etc. And I think, something we really wrestled with and continue to wrestle with as researchers on this particular research study is the strength of this study was the breadth and the enormous size of this data set. It was, hundreds of thousands of vehicles across the state. There were some other studies, there have been a few other studies of the impact of alerts that have really focused on a tiny number. I believe that the Kentucky study that we referenced earlier, they took like a real deep dive on maybe something like 7 work zones. So I think it's a real balance. We would love to have the opportunity to dig more deeply into some specific types, and we do have a few on the docket. Definitely if there's researchers here who have specific types they're looking for, we're really open to some suggestions. And then I know that we will also be looking at, we've got statewide, again, that California Highway Patrol SWITRS data on crashes. So I think something we may be looking at specifically is, all right, of the CMV involved work zone crashes in 2022, because that's our most recent year we have, what were the conditions? So if we can see anything specific around conditions that we can filter for in our data set, we might see, okay, the crashes for this type of work zone are overrepresented, and then we'll see, are we seeing more or less of an impact for the alerts in those types of work zones that are being flagged as maybe higher risk. And JJ, I don't know if that was your hand from before or if that's still a new question.
I have a new question.
Excellent, yeah.
This question is for Nick and Andrew. And they said they noticed that there was a difference in behaviors on weekdays versus weekends when you did the analysis. And they're wondering why they think that might be.
Overall, that's probably going to be due to the amount of trucks on the road at the time. Deliveries usually are taking place during the weekdays and a lot less on the weekends.
Yep, exactly. Traffic's different.
Anything else that is really jumping out from the Q&A? I know we've had such a rich conversation here. Anything else jumping out? And we will have some time at the end. We will all be around. So if you want to just chime in at the end, we're happy to stick around and answer questions.
I would like to just provide a little bit of an answer that wraps up the 2 questions that JJ just provided into sort of one thing is of a lot of the factors that we're looking at and the analyses we've done so far, we are finding quite a difference in the way that vehicles respond to alerts in District 2 compared to District 11. So not only do we look at the traffic of the day or the type of work zones that it is. But we are finding quite a difference between District 2 being in sort of a more rural and a more mountainous area, the routes that are being driven and the topography, especially of the area around there, tend to affect behavior a little bit differently than they do down here in San Diego, where there's a lot more flat urban, traffic heavy areas. And so of all the factors so far that we've been able to look at, really just which district it's in seems to have a really big impact on driving behavior. And so that's one of those things, along with day of the week or type of work zone, that we need to be able to either tease out or account for when we're looking at how effective these alerts might be. And I think what's going to be really interesting is the addition of District 7 and its high rate of traffic and sort of a different area to look at. We're wondering if it'll be more similar to how those in San Diego County behave, or if they are going to be a completely different district as far as their behavior is. And so I just wanted to throw that out there as something that we're really interested in, that it's not just different parts of California, but as we see research in this type of area, these sort of tech-supported alerting systems, that we think about how they might impact the behavior of drivers in other states and places where it's really snowy or it rains a lot, or those sorts of things, that just because we're looking at it, we have a large sample here, it is going to change from region to region, and laws are different and speed limits are different and all of those things. And so there's a very vast wealth of area to explore here, beyond what we've been able to do so far.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. All right, anything else pressing from Q&A at this time? Otherwise, I'm going to move us along to our wrap up. We're coming to the end of this journey together. All right, excellent. Well, I'm going to move us on to connecting real world research findings and experience to real world change. Okay, excellent. So how can we translate? So again, huge thank you to Nick and to Andrew and to everyone who chimed in on the Q&A. A huge thank you to Sarah, JJ, and Leslie there. So we've heard a lot about the research. We've heard some driver perspectives. We've heard some fleet perspectives, some industry perspectives. Given what we've heard here, how can we turn this into real world change to maximize driving safety? We do have some clear evidence that these alerts do reduce speed in high risk zones, but there's still many open questions. We know these alerts don't help all drivers. And, again, there is some evidence that they may increase distraction for a subset of drivers. So there's a cost to all technology. Nothing is ever free. Nothing is ever pure benefit. So how can we minimize this cost and maximize benefits? How do we fill in our knowledge gaps? And how do we standardize and expand technologies like this with known safety benefits? Those who do research in the safety field, we can find that something helps all that we want, but unless people are using it, it's just really not going to have that scaled impact that we're looking for to truly move the needle on safety. So right now, alerting is a patchwork, and we all suffer from this. Drivers, fleets, other road users, as Dr. Hill noted, when there's a crash involving a CMV, what was it, 80% of the time, it's the other drivers, the vulnerable road users, 82% of the time who lose their lives. So drivers may need to have a different app for every state, where the accuracy and timeliness of those alerts may vary widely. Drivers may need to pay for alerts in some states, but get them for free in others. This not only reduces trust in in-cab alerting, as Nick and Andrew alluded to. You may get the alerts and start to depend on them. Then you may suddenly not get them, or they may change. And this prevents drivers and fleets from having a seamless web of technology to support them in safe driving across state lines. For example, this study has funded in-cab alerts for one mobile application for select areas of California for 1.5 years. When we worked with our institutional review board to get ethical approval for this study, we seriously debated whether this inconsistency might overall have a negative impact on road safety. Drivers might get used to having alerts in District 11, then they might be surprised or not know that the alerts were stopping when they crossed over into District 8. However, we recognize that this is currently the national state of affairs. When drivers move into a new region, a new state, they have no guarantee that they're going to get the same information they got before. We want to highlight that California is actively working on a project to collect, integrate, and disseminate work zone data. So kudos to California. Our state is clearly aware of this issue and taking some great impactful steps to bring more consistency and breadth to alert drivers about active work zones. Our tech support, if you could throw that Department of Transportation California link in, that would be great. On the national level, the United States Department of Transportation has also been working for years to address this gap by publishing a registry of work zone data feeds. And again, our tech support folks, if you can throw that DOT Data Hub link in there. So active work zone data feeds are found here. Currently, it lists feeds from 25 states or jurisdictions. So a lot of this data is being collated, is being made publicly available. But as we saw in our conversation with DriveWise, it takes a lot to turn that data feed into alerts. We certainly learned a lot about the challenges and all the work that goes into translating these raw data into an actual helpful, safe, accurate alerting experience. And it takes a tremendous amount of labor. So, how do we move from all of these data feeds to actually having a consistent, safe, ideally free alerting experience? We know that as researchers, fleets, and corporate actors, we've got a lot of folks in the room here, we all depend on state and national policy to help us advance safety. This includes laws, regulations, standards, and guidelines, and funding. We really see and appreciate the power that our local, state, and federal government partners have in setting the direction, allocating resources, and turning findings into effective implementation. Again, this includes laws, regulations, setting funding priorities, setting standards and guidelines, and releasing strategic plans and directives, like a Vision Zero policy, for example. And this helps us all to set our direction, allocate resources, and shape implementation in the form of programs, enforcement, and services. We know, we know that there are some fellow researchers here on the call with us today, as well as plenty of folks from fleets and vendors who conduct their own research that's less focused on the academic space. And we want to continue to join together to advocate for and expand the study of and advancement of in-cab alerting and other technologies, ensuring that this promising technology has the greatest positive impact while minimizing both financial and safety costs. When we took a look at the recent strategic plan for the US DOT, and we know that an updated one is forthcoming, we're just really appreciating the fact that so many people in this room have shared priorities in terms of the road ahead for advancing commercial vehicle safety in the US. These are all kind of strategic goals here that I think everyone in this room shares. So we know that at a high level, we're all sharing the same goal and visions, and we look forward to partnering with and learning from all of you here to make positive change. We're really coming to the end of our webinar here. Truly appreciate you taking the time. You know, this is a lot of time on an August Friday, so really appreciate so many people making the time to join us here today. We want to encourage anyone in attendance to reach out to us. I know you've gotten our contact information in a few ways, but tech support, if you would throw in some contact information there. If you're interested in discussing potential research collaboration or opportunity, we just love to hear ideas, or if we can connect you with someone in our network, of course, we want to do so. Any scholars in attendance, or of course, anyone from any field who wants to dig more into our methodology. We learned so much here that we are sure would help another research group spin up a study very quickly. So really happy to share our insights there. And I just wanted to remind folks, we're always happy to give additional presentations. We had the pleasure of presenting to SANDAG a few weeks back. We're going to be presenting to some California Highway Patrol colleagues next week who weren't able to make this time slot. So always happy to schedule times to present on our work and spread the impact. We also, as we noted at the top of the presentation, we hope you'll check out our extensive free educational resources that we've got on our TREDS website, and I know the tech folks will throw that link in the chat. We've got free programs for commercial drivers, the general public, health professionals, and law enforcement. And we're especially proud of one of our latest programs, the Distraction Zone, which this year received 2 Emmys from the Pacific Southwest chapter of the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. This is our director, Michael Brueggemeyer, and the research PM who led this, Leslie Phillips, is part of our tech support team. So congratulations, Leslie. It's really, it deserved those Emmys, so we're really proud of that. And we want everyone to experience this great free driving safety program. As always, we are so grateful to FMCSA for funding our work, and we could not have done this without the support and partnership of so many great folks at UC San Diego, Caltrans, California Highway Patrol, California Trucking Association, OIDA Foundation, DriveWise, and so many others. Huge thank you to the whole research team that supported this study. We've got Dr. Hill, our principal investigator, Dr. Moran, our co-investigator, Dr. Richard Garfien, our stats consultant and epidemiologist, Liz Kelly, our team project management lead, Sarah Hacker and Carly Glasson, our data analysts, and JJ Rogers, our all-around partner in technology studies. She's running her own super interesting research study right now. And a special thank you to our webinar team, Leslie Phillips, JJ Rogers, Sarah Hacker. Thank you so much. And this concludes our webinar. We are here for any additional Q&A, any additional questions you may have. Otherwise, if you don't have any additional questions, wishing you a lovely rest of your day, a great weekend, and thank you again for making the time to attend. We will get you a recording, and please follow up with us if there's anything else we can provide to give you some information on our study today. Thank you so much for coming.